Survival to me means, shelter, food, water.
Getting through every single day without breaking down.
Going through something tough, but you're staying strong and you'll live through it.
It means like getting by, it means living, and it means being able to keep on keeping on.
The choice is clear, life or death, but choosing well is often a difficult task and comes with responsibility and consequence.
The influences around us, from family, friends, and media marketing, can move us in different directions at different times.
What looks good for us now may not be life-giving in the long run.
Sometimes, life can give us a lot of challenges that seem overwhelming, and we're just trying to survive bad situations or get away to a better place.
Life from death. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Tom.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is Real Faith TV.
The teens on the street had a pretty good idea on the meaning of survival.
We'll talk with them more in a few minutes, as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Fabian Deborah, who will share with us his story of survival growing up in the housing projects of Los Angeles and as a member of an East LA gang when he was a teenager.
His is a story of resurrection, a true story of conversion and transformation from death to life.
I met up with Fabian at a Diocese of Metuchen Young Adult Summit. I have to say, meeting him was truly a life-changing experience.
Let's meet him now and hear how his story and his life begins, with the odds stacked against him.
Growing up in Los Angeles, it was not as great as it could have been. Of course, in the early years of my life, I did have the love of my mother and my father, who tried his best to give me whatever it was I needed. But because of the environment, growing up in the housing projects, there was a lot of traumatic events taking place there with drugs, gangs, and violence. And so being a kid who's trying to be himself, it was very difficult. My father sadly then became a drug addict. At first he was there for me as a responsible father, but he became absent in my life. In and out of prison, he'll come for 2 months, go back and do 4 years. And carrying that, which kind of threw me for a loop. And as a kid, you're trying to make sense of all these things. And it's very difficult to, especially when your mother is an immigrant and financially deprived. So why I believe that I was involved in gangs was because of what I was running from, the fact that I was carrying lots of pain. I was hopeless and helpless. And there was 8 local gangs in my community of Boyle Heights, so no matter what corner of the neighborhood I went, there was a gang. And so it was very overwhelming for me. I was being bullied. They would steal my bikes. So I'm like, how do I respond to this? I didn't have a crew or someone to protect me. Eventually one night they caught me in my lowest point, where the thing I did was look for my cousin, who was like an older brother, but he was already involved in gangs. He's the one that took me into the gang, which was the worst mistake I ever made. I didn't realize what gangs were about. I didn't realize gangs came with a set of rules that keep you enslaved and entrapped in this belief system that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make sense. It took my childhood and my freedom.
I think it's extremely difficult as young people to grow up with parents who aren't making the best decisions and aren't good influences for us. And I think Fabian joined the gang because he wanted to be accepted and loved. And I think that a lot of us are searching for that right now.
I feel like that is probably one of the main reasons that someone would turn to something like that, or even to drugs and alcohol, just as an escape from the hopeless situation that they're in.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's introduce our studio guests and see if they've ever felt stuck in a hopeless situation.
Okay, they are Ella,
Ariana,
Ricky,
Alex,
and Jerry,
Carly,
and Justin.
Have you ever had an experience where you felt totally hopeless?
I would definitely have to say the most helpless time in my life was in middle school and just getting bullied by all those people that I thought were my friends and my family, and knowing that I had nowhere else to turn because these were the people that I trusted my whole life with, and now they're against me. That's a really heartbreaking moment.
I feel the same way. When I was in 6th grade, I was bullied. I'd come home crying off the bus every day, and it was like I felt like I had nowhere to go, and I pushed everyone that was trying to help me away, and I just felt like I didn't deserve their help.
My father and I don't have a very good relationship. It's constant fighting, and I feel like hopeless because no matter what I do, it's never good enough, it's never right, it's always a mistake. You kind of lose yourself sometimes because you're trying to please somebody, like I'm trying to please my dad, and it's just, I feel hopeless because I can't do anything correct for him.
I think when I felt hopeless was During Hurricane Sandy, there was just a point, like we didn't have power for a really long time. And I think like a week and a half in, I just had this moment where I just felt like nothing was going to get better and that I couldn't see like that light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't in my control, and I think that's like what we're all talking about. And sometimes we feel alone, and I think that's one of the worst situations. When we feel hopeless, we feel alone.
Yeah, speaking of things not being in our control, my grandmother's a cancer survivor. When she was still sort of fighting her battle, I remember that like you always feel like angry and sad, but like underneath all of that, there's just like this utter hopelessness that you know there's really nothing you can do about it, that it's sort of up to God and up to luck, and you don't know how it's going to turn out.
Currently, Fabian is a substance abuse counselor and resident artist at Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention program in the United States.
He is also a painter and a muralist who has produced numerous murals in the Los Angeles area, as well as a large-scale mural for the 1994 World Cup at the Los Angeles International Airport.
Next, as Fabian continues his story, he shares with us some of the misconceptions of those who join gangs.
And how drugs and alcohol lead to a destructive addiction at an early age, as it did for him.
People get the misconception that people join gangs because of the money and the power, and that happens. But it's mainly because they're running away from something. Now, if you were to put me in a neighborhood that is more of a high end, my choices are different than the choices I have in the housing projects. I've seen a lot of people die before me. I found a dead body when I was like 14 years old. And all these things and events that took place that were very unhealthy, unhumane. I couldn't go anywhere, I had to stay within my little boundaries. Every time we would leave the housing projects, I would have to watch my back. Couldn't even go to the DMV or have lunch with mom because I'm always looking over my shoulder. The belief system that they embed in you is so thick that you're not allowed to show weakness or shed tears. I was about 17 when I got shot on my left leg. I was experimenting with alcohol and marijuana at a very young age. To me, it was fun and games. I didn't realize that I was eventually going to lose control behind it and become a major drug addict. It just progressed, and I remember my mother, she slapped me in the neck and said, "Stop smoking marijuana." And I told my mother, I said, "I can stop. It's just weed." This was at 12.
Let's go back to the teens on the street, where we asked them, has there ever been a time in your life when you felt like the path you were on was leading you to death?
Let's hear what they had to say.
I've had hard times in my life where I just didn't feel like doing anything anymore, just stopping my life and just doing whatever. But you move past it and you live with it.
During the time that my parents were separating was very hard for me, and there were a lot of other things that were going on at the same time, and I considered suicide, but I didn't. I chose to stay away from that path.
Over the past 2 years, I've gone to rehab and stuff, but at this point, I'm doing a lot better than I was doing.
Past couple of years, I've been bullied, and bullying is a really tough time. I definitely considered suicide, and also my mom, she has lupus, and she might have cancer, and I'm just overwhelmed about that.
At one point, I was addicted to painkillers because I was prescribed them because I was in a car accident. But eventually, I realized that I needed to stop doing that, and I turned my path around.
I think one of the best ways to show hope is by sharing your stories with people. When we're hopeless, we feel really alone. I think the biggest mistake we make when we're hopeless is pushing people away, because I think that's when we need people the most. Because while we're consumed with our situation and we just can't see the ray of hope, the other people can give us a different perspective based on what they've lived through. And I feel that your parents, your family, your friends, there's so many people. And even if you don't have those people in your life, looking to the Bible and looking what Jesus went through and what the people in the Bible went through, it's just, you can find that hope. It's just sometimes we have to open our eyes a little bit.
I feel like, in my personal experience, that it's easier to find hope in the world when you go to people that you don't know. This past year, I got really involved in working at the soup kitchen. And going there every week and just meeting all those people, and they have so little material objects, but they are just happy. And they're happy with what they have. And I feel like a lot of people focus on what they don't have instead of what they do have.
Just if you can see all these beautiful signs, like how vast the ocean is, or how wide the world is, the greatness of nature, that God's power, we can realize that no matter how low we sink, He's going to bring us back up. Imagine what He has in store for you. So that's what I use to have faith, and that's what we can all use to have faith, that we're going to be brought out of this darkness.
Going on with what Rick said about sinking down and rising up, it's like what I've always learned is that good things will always come out of bad things. No matter how bad things get, good will come out of it. And you never really know what happens, and you don't really know God's plan for you. You're probably going to get through it. God will drag you out of the darkness.
I feel like listening to other people's stories can just be a great way to inspire hope for yourself, just hearing about their struggles and how they've overcome them.
Yeah, like Fabian's story, I feel can really give hope to people who are in a hopeless situation right now.
As Christians, we know that giving over to something bigger than ourselves and dying to selfishness,
and the need for immediate gratification or an easy fix, is at the heart of the Paschal mystery.
Jesus Christ, by His suffering, death, and resurrection, showed us the sacredness of life and its struggles, as well as its joys and opportunities for new beginnings.
He, as the Son of God, made the ultimate sacrifice by giving His life for us to redeem us from all the wrongs we have done as a result of a bad choice.
Next, Fabian shares with us an extraordinary moment when he was able to turn his life around.
He was 30 years old and addicted to drugs. His mother had just caught him doing drugs in her attic and was threatening to call the police.
In an effort to escape the authorities and his inner demons, Fabian ran out of the house and towards a nearby freeway, high from the drugs in his system, with no plan or hope for changing direction.
Let's hear what happened next.
And as I'm walking the freeway, I can hear the sound of the trucks calling me. And then at the same time, I hear this voice. Kill yourself. Kill yourself. You don't deserve to live. And it's starting to instill fear, and I'm getting nervous and scared. And it's so ugly, that voice, that I didn't want to hear it. So I ran from it, and I ran into the freeway. And then I see a truck coming, and I realized that this is it. This is where I die. And I remember looking at the truck, and I clenched my fist and I twist my body as I'm waiting for the impact of the truck. And before that, I said, my kids. And I looked up. And once I said my kids, this gust of wind, something spiritual took place that moment. And that gust of wind allowed me to get to the center divider. When I hit my chest so hard against the concrete, I realized that the truck didn't hit me. And that's when I looked up, and I'm there staring at the sky and appreciating the beauty and the love and the serenity and the compassion, the joy that was coming from this direct contact. And I knew that it was only by the grace of my God that I was saved that day. And from that point on, I knew that I had to get the help. I ran and I called my beautiful mother, who never gave up on me. Mom, I almost got killed today. Quiet, silence. And then she said, where you at? I'm on my way, don't move. And it's the image, I say, of the Virgin Mary when she comes to pick up her child from the cross. Because when I was standing by that payphone and I looked all smoked out, dead, half dead. But what she could not see was the flame, the fire that I discovered in the freeway incident. And when she calls me in her car, she begins to cry. And she says, I don't know what's gonna be of you, or what's gonna be, you're gonna end up killing yourself, or you're gonna end up killing me from everything that you're doing. And then I said, Mom, guess what? And she said, what? I think I have a drug problem. And she laughed and she said, I've been trying to tell you this for the past 15 years. You just discovered that you have a drug problem. And then she said, you're crazy, you're too much. You got 3 days to clean it up and go to rehab. And I did.
You know, I interviewed him a couple months back, and just hearing his story again really gives me chills, because I think, like, you know, a lot of us talk about being saved by Jesus in a figurative sense, but he was really saved by Jesus in his story, and it's just, it's so inspiring.
I know, just hearing it now for the first time is really giving me chills too.
Yeah.
So can any of you relate to any part of Fabian's story?
Or what are some events in your lives that can make you feel hopeless?
Definitely in my life. Drug use has appeared in people that are close to my heart. A good friend of mine, that he was messing with drugs and alcohol. When he was going to take a train back to his house, he had attempted to jump in front of the train because he wanted to take his own life, because he didn't want to live anymore, because he was being overpowered by everything else in his life. And that, to hear that and to just want to run up and like shake him and be like, come on, like you can do this, and know that I can't, that's a very hopeless and helpless moment in my life.
One of the most difficult things about things like depression or hopelessness is that ultimately you can only help so much. It has to be them who takes the last step.
I felt hopeless when I had a severe injury from track, and I was like told like if I didn't like go through the effort of trying to make it better, like that I wouldn't be able to run anymore. And I was like really depressed for a while, and like my friends and family, like they just kept telling me that I should just keep pushing through it. And luckily I did go through it and got through like the surgery and everything, so I can run now.
I think the thing with drugs is it spirals out of control. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's this one-time thing, and then it's not going to hurt anyone. But it does. It causes a web. I think that's where the hopelessness comes into it. It's just like all of a sudden it's like, how did I get here? And then it just you keep searching for an exit, and you just keep hitting a concrete wall with it, and that causes that despair. It almost makes it seem as if there's no way out, but there is, and that's through God.
Yeah, I have a friend, he got involved with drugs, alcohol, basically anything to rebel. And like you said, they like get wrapped up in it, and they like end up hating themselves for it. He tried to take his life, and he's like my best friend today, that I couldn't even imagine my life without knowing him, that if he had, I can't tell him enough. Like, I love you so much. I can't tell you how much you've touched me. Like, he is just the greatest person in my life, and I'm so glad to have him.
Something that made me feel hopeless a long time ago was, and a lot of people can relate to this, is a first breakup with someone that you're in a relationship with. It makes you feel really hopeless when someone just breaks up with you, and the first one's always the toughest.
Last night, my boyfriend told me that his cousin had died in a car accident, and I felt kind of bad and hopeless because I didn't know how to help him like get through that. Like, I don't even know how to help myself if I lose somebody, and I'm just scared that since he's losing so many family members lately, that he's going to end up doing something that he regrets, and I don't want to lose him.
The great promise of Easter is that resurrection and ascension is the final part of the Paschal mystery.
Jesus has beaten death for us and promises that we will join in that great experience, both in our earthly lives and our lives in God after our mortal deaths.
That means we have been given the chance at a new life time and time again, not just a return to what has gone before.
When he left his disciples, Jesus promised the Spirit to give its comforting and healing presence in all times, until the end of the world.
Like Fabian, many people tell stories of how they felt that grace of Jesus' Spirit come into their lives at dark moments and give them the strength to turn their lives in new directions.
Making good choices for ourselves is important, but we will find it easiest when we don't go through it alone.
We need family and friends to help get us through times of hopelessness and difficulty.
If we can't turn to family for whatever reason, there may be teachers or professionals who can guide us and support us.
So, what would you do if you were on a path where you felt hopeless? Where would you go for help?
That's what we asked the teens on the street.
Let's check it out.
I made some friends who were actually going through something really similar, and we talked about it. I stayed at their house more often than I stayed at my parents' house during that time.
This kid helped me out a lot, but most of my friends and my family definitely helped. I stayed home for days, but eventually I got back out of the house.
My boyfriend helped me a lot with that. I would tell him everything, and also my family would help me too. I definitely started going to church more when this was occurring. I felt like I was being touched by God, and I was praying more, and I felt more relieved.
We've gone through a lot of counseling and stuff.
I just thought about the future and not the present.
Got really close with my family, and then I just kept my head up and stayed strong.
I was getting into a lot of the wrong things with like drugs and gangs, and I just turned my life over to God, pretty much. I just started going to church, and everything started getting better.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that freedom is the power rooted in reason
and will, to act or not to act, to do this or that, and to perform deliberate actions on one's own responsibility.
By free will, one shapes one's own life.
Next, Fabian discusses how his near-death experience on the freeway was his moment of liberation.
when he became free of all the earthly restraints that were destroying his life, both physical and spiritual.
I knew that that feeling that I received in the freeway incident, it was such a beautiful feeling, and it's the feeling that I try to give back and share to those who are still struggling with their addiction, who are still in gang violence. Everything that gangs have to offer is a myth. There's nothing there. So if you're thinking about joining a gang or using drugs to make you feel better, that's not the way. Do some soul searching. Look around you. Pay attention. That could be you. You're no different than anyone else. Trust me. I thought the same thing. And thank God that I was saved from that. I have friends who are doing life today, having their children to visit them every year just to be near dad. Redirect your life, really refocus. Allow yourself to feel again. There is a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity. Because I am a living testimony of that. Believe and give yourself the opportunity and let go and allow God. And you will see, once you put the belief and the action behind it, things will start to change. But you have to allow God to touch you when you find yourself in your lowest end. Forgiveness of self plays a big role. You have to forgive oneself before you can let go and move beyond your past. You can't carry the baggage. You gotta let it go. It tends to want to come back and haunt you, But for me, it's like, no, God didn't bring me this far to continue to carry that baggage. And so I say to you to give yourself the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to change. Find someone that you can help you, mentor you. Find your gift, whether it's communication skills, poetry, music, art, and hold on to that gift, because that can reignite hope.
How has your faith helped to sustain you during times of hopelessness?
Trouble, whenever I'm in need of help, I always realize that if I follow God, if I walk with Him through whatever hardship, He's going to lead me out of danger and into light.
When I was in a massive depression, I'd always just want to give up, just stop what I'm doing, end everything. But there was just this little voice in my head that would always tell me, stop. You can do this. You can get through this. I will help you. And I always believed that that voice was God speaking to me and Him helping me out, trying to keep myself on here.
Because I have such a strong faith, I feel that I never really have a really dark moment. I hear a bunch of stories from everyone else, and I can't ever relate to it because I feel like I always have that light that's always guiding me through.
Though I haven't had really deep personal experiences where I felt hopeless, I've definitely witnessed hopelessness. And when I visited nursing homes and with my friends sometimes, and my faith has given me that courage and that foundation to help people out of their hopeless situations.
Personally, I felt like when I was in a hopeless place, everyone was just, go to God, go to church. So I went to church more, and I thought just walking in church was going to make every single problem disappear, but it's not going to deteriorate all the hopelessness and all the bad things in life. They're still going to be there. But now you have somebody pushing you forward and pushing you through all those bad times, and that's what's going to push you through the hopelessness. But it's not easy. There's always going to be tough times. But when you rely on God and when you just throw your hands up and say, just take me where you want to take me, it becomes a lot easier. And you know that He's going to get you through this.
For me personally, I think God sent my friends who have been through, I know, a lot worse situations to help me, and for them to share their experiences with me, and listening to what they've been through helped me get through my situation.
It sounds bad, but I don't pray as often as I should, but I think that when I do pray, I know that when I do pray, I just feel better. I feel kind of cleansed, I guess you could say. So when I do feel hopeless and I'm in a bad position, my faith helps me because I just pray.
When I'm having really rough times and I'll be in tears and just struggling with everything, and I'll just look up and I'll just be like, God, I need your help because I can't do this anymore. After I get to times like that, I just feel like this huge weight is lifted off my shoulders, and I'll find a way to cope with it, and I'll find a release somewhere that's healthy and listening to music or watching my favorite TV show. I know from those things that God's there.
A lot of the times it unfortunately takes us to go to like our darkest times to actually find the strength in our relationship with God that we never really knew was there.
And I feel like also what Arian was saying, like people will walk through the doors of church and sit there and be like, well, I didn't get anything out of it, like now what? And you have to be open to that. You have to open yourself and really commit yourself to a relationship with God. It's not something that's like just gonna happen and you're gonna feel better.
When speaking about his paintings, Fabian has said that his artwork is recognizable
because in each piece he tries to include that moment in life when God's presence becomes unexpectedly apparent.
That moment when someone on the wrong path suddenly sees the right road and decides to take it.
What is it like to be on the wrong path? A road that certainly leads to physical and spiritual death. Fabian was saved literally, physically, and spiritually on that day on the freeway.
God helped to pull him out of his despair and hopelessness.
How has God pulled you out of moments of despair and hopelessness in your life?
Contact us and tell us your story.
We'd love to hear from you.
Check us out at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And although we have no control over when and where our life on earth will come to an end,
we do have a choice when it comes to choosing if we want to spend eternity in heaven with God.
We are reminded of this when we read Deuteronomy chapter 30, when God said to the Israelites,
"See, I have today set before you life and good, death and evil."
So when you have the choice between life and death, choose life and good.
Because life is beautiful, and so are you.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on Real Faith TV. God bless.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.